Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Founder League Podcast, a Christian leaders podcast powered by EBEB Solutions, energy benefits for every business. Go to ebebsolutions.com today and get your free energy audit. It will literally save you time and money. Friends, today on the podcast, we wrap up the Wisdom in the Wound series with a very special interview. The interview is from my dear friend, spiritual mentor, spiritual father, Charles Causey, and me. He peppers me with some of my own medicine, gives me all the questions about the book, and it's just a really great way to celebrate all that God continues to do through this writing and through this community, through you. So thank you for being here. Thank you for being a part of this mini series. I hope and pray that if you pick up a copy of the book, it moves you closer to Jesus. This work over the last several years has done just that for me. And so that's my prayer. That's my hope. And I'd love to hear from you. What are your reflections? What are you thinking? I love all the reviews that we're getting on Amazon, and I'm so thankful for those of you who are leaving them. And just know I read every single one. It means the world to me. So now a quick word from our sponsors. And here is my conversation with Charles Causey. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the podcast. I am here for a very special event with one of my spiritual fathers, somebody who I respect so much. Charles Causey has been on the podcast multiple times, Chaplain General. Sir, welcome back to the podcast for this very special event.
Hey, thanks, Tony. I'm excited to be here. This is awesome. And I guess I should say welcome to your own podcast.
That's right, because we're going to flip the mic today. You're going to be the host, and I am going to be the guest. You're going to ask me all the questions. As an endorser of the book, you've, of course, read it. And I'm so thankful for that endorsement and for just your presence in my life. You know how much I love you and your family.
Feelings are mutual. Thanks, Tony. Love you too. All right. Well, hey, Tony, first off, let's just give listeners an update on the Miltenberger family. What's everybody up to right now?
Well, as we record this, school is just starting. So Connor is entering his youngster year at the Naval Academy. Caleb is a freshman, Shiloh 8th grade. Karen and I are just doing our very best to Uber kids around all the time. And so we are so thankful for our community. And just, of course, we're, as we record this now, we're in the middle of book launch. And so you know how that's a crazy adventure, but it's God's generosity and his fullness has been on display from day one throughout this journey. And I'm so thankful for a God that meets us in a season of busyness.
Yeah, well, you have an amazing family. All your kids are amazing. Karen's phenomenal. And I always love getting the Miltenberger update. So now you and I, our friendship was born a long time ago. And
2007.
That's a while ago. That's almost 20 years.
Almost 20 years.
I don't feel that old.
I do.
But one of the parts of our initial friendship was actually talking about writing a book, and now this will be like your solo premiere book launch. So anyway, tell me about the title of your new book, The Wound, Wisdom in the Wound, and what does that mean?
So full disclosure, this is a story I've never shared to anyone else. And so I love to share it with my podcast family, the Bold Ones. I didn't want the book to be named this.
Wow.
Right. So there was an interesting kind of moment, a tensious moment between the publisher and I. If you've never done a book writing thing, one of the things that happens is you collaborate with the publisher. The publisher has an interest in the book. And so one of the things that happened was I was calling the book Be Courageous, right? Why Your Greatest Gift is on the Other Side of Your Wound. And I was really I had been calling the book that title for a long time, months. And so the publisher sent me an email and said, hey, here are the title suggestions. And I was like, whoa, I didn't know we were changing the title. I had a complete Tony moment where I was overly emotional about it. And which is because it bumped up against my wound, right? Like this idea about not being seen. And so then I took some time, I immediately shot an email back, which is what I recommend people don't do. And then we talked about it a little bit more. And then the next day I woke up and I felt so convicted that I just didn't handle it very well. So then I repented, and to the publisher's credit, they also were like, hey, we probably didn't, enter into this dialogue with enough sensitivity, understanding how much passion. And so then we talked, like we came together and came up with the title Wisdom in the Wound. And I'm so thankful that we did, because what the title really means to me is this idea that one of the things I say in the book is that, wisdom isn't the absence of wounding, because I really do believe that we all have a version of it. It's the intimacy with their wound, meaning that if you can get to know the edges of your wound, you have the opportunity to serve God in a way that you wouldn't otherwise.
Wow. Yeah, that's incredible. I think there's probably a few other authors out there that can relate to that. It's when the publisher picks out a title and it wasn't.
You had that problem, didn't you?
I'm one of them. But if the author, they've been, it's like a baby to them, right? And you've been carrying that around for a while with calling your baby the same name, calling the baby the same name. And then all of a sudden somebody says, no, that's not the name of your baby. Your baby's going to be this name. Yeah, it makes sense. There's an emotional reaction.
I didn't know we were changing the name like that.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I had a very similar experience. But what was your inspiration to write this book?
Well, everyone remembers 2020, right? And kind of the COVID timeframe and all of that sort of, what an interesting season that was. I initially thought about this book when Karen and I were on our second walk of the day, and we are on this walk and we come to this place, and I'm like, babe, I feel like I've been here before. And she was like, yeah, you were here this morning. And I was like, no, not like that. Like emotionally, I've been here before. And it's really funny if you know my wife, because she said it in a certain kind of way.
I can hear it.
I know you can. And here's the realization, and I know this is true too. When I was deployed, one of the things that became really clear is that prolonged stress turns cracks into your lives into canyons. And so if you had a marriage problem before going on deployment, it magnified it, it blew it up, right? And so a crack is anything that you can step over. It's anything that can be ignored. But a canyon's completely different. You can get lost in a canyon. You could die in a canyon, but you can also explore canyons in a way that could possibly change your life. And that was the kind of the foundational moment of when I was like, there's something here. And then over the years of kind of working with my own psychologist and talking to, spiritual leaders in my own life, and just seeing the pastoring in general and kind of seeing how all that played out, it was pretty clear that God was propelling this journey in a different kind of way. And that's how Wisdom in the Wound got here.
Wow, thanks. And I love that analogy about cracks versus canyons. It's very powerful.
Well, so another confession that I haven't told anywhere else is I pitched the book Cracks to Canyons to the publisher, and they were like, no, this isn't it. You can't write a book about COVID. Nobody wants to read it. And I'm like, well, it's not about COVID. And they were like, no, it is about COVID. I was like, COVID's the backdrop. And they were like, no, come back when it's a little bit more cooked. And I'm thankful, right? And so I'm thankful.
Yeah, I had an agent tell me that, they don't want us to write about wounds until they're a scar.
Yeah.
Like if it's still got any bandages or it's whatever.
I've heard that same expression, like don't preach through wounds, preach through scars. Yeah. That idea that if it's still really sensitive, you're probably not ready to share it.
Yeah. It's interesting. Well, hey, I want to talk about the book crafting process. So one of the questions I had was, how many drafts did you go through, and did the book as it is now that it's going to be released here next month, did it have like a different format? We know it had a different name from what you shared, but did it have a different format or anything?
Yes, there's so many changes. So, the hard part is that there were so many drafts of individual chapters that it's really hard to like say the book had like 3 distinct drafts. The truth is like I started writing it, and then I would send some thoughts, or I would reread it myself. And one of the things that I did that was a little bit unique, I think, is I'm a verbal processor, as you know. And so as a verbal processor, I had the ability to then use this microphone, which is a good microphone. I would use the microphone and then I would talk to text instead of typing.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And I'm a good typer. It's not like I'm a terrible typer, but it just, I could think so much faster. And so what that would do is it would allow me to get a lot of words down on paper. They were messy words though. They needed a lot of editing. And at one point in time, my incredible editor, who's from Invite, she's wonderful. She emailed me back and she goes, nothing in this chapter makes sense.
Oh man.
And I was like, what do you mean? She's like, it just doesn't sound like anything else in the book. And I was like, oh, I think I forgot to go back and edit it after I talked to text. Because it's real rough. It's real rough. Talk to text is real rough. And now it's getting better with AI and all that jazz. And then I gave the book as a really rough draft to some people when Karen and I went on a little vacation at the beginning of the year. And with their feedback, then there was another kind of overhaul, specifically around the activities at the end of the book. And one of the things that's just hard for people in this kind of abstract thought work, as you know, is it's hard for people to put handles on it, right? Is how do I apply this to my life? And so a part that got added to the book that I'm super proud of is kind of like, I call it a wound identification guide, but one of those things that kind of helps people name some wounds, even though I think, there's lots of them that didn't get mentioned in the book. I gave, 3 to 5 that are clear, concrete examples.
Yeah, I think we're going to talk about that in a little bit, but still talking about the crafting of it, the changing of it. And I know you talked about kind of the initial part of it, but how did your personal experiences, and this is just overall, in general, any personal experience, how did that influence you and the writing of this book? And you could go deep with like the wound if you wanted to now.
Sure.
Yeah.
I think most of my podcast family has heard me talk about my wound before, this feeling like I want to be seen. And, I would say that through my own work, and it's work that was done with, with my psychologist who I still see. His name is Steve. And so Steve and I have worked on this for a really long time. And my own journey is like, how do I not respond to that feeling of not being seen? And what I've realized as I began to pull the thread is that so much of the careers that I've chosen are because of that. So much of the work that I do. And throughout this process, it's been learning that like that is a part of who I am. And that's not good or bad. It just is. And it's okay. It's okay to have that as a wound. Like it's okay to feel sensitive around those things. And it's a yes and, not an either or. And I can also choose to surrender some of that stuff and look for the greater gift on the other side as well. And so I don't have to make decisions based off of those feelings. And it's funny, as you were asking me the question, I was thinking back to a story that you and I uniquely share. It's
you have permission. No.
I will. Do you remember we were on a training in Rome, Georgia, right? And one of the things that happened was you asked me why I felt the need to ask questions that had some really like big words in it, right? Like basically it was not normally the way that I talked. And you were like, Sergeant Miltenberger, why, that doesn't sound like you normally. Why do you feel the need to do that now? And I didn't have words for it at the time, but in hindsight, I would say it's because I really want these people to like me.
Yeah. I don't remember that. It does sound like something I would ask, but wow, the fact that you remember that and that
it's one of those moments like, why do I do that? Right? Like, why do I ask those questions like that in that space? And here's the good news, right? We would call it sanctification. The Lord has done such a good work on me over the years. I do that a lot less now, but I would be lying if I tell you that it went away completely. Like I'm still, every once in a while, I still stretch for a little bit of like, hey, look at me, and I, obviously I'm podcasting. So a lot of my life is revolved around that.
Oh yeah. And I understand. I think a lot of listeners would identify with that because I'll say something to somebody and it doesn't sound like me and it's like flattering to and I'll walk away and go, why why was I like catering to, or,
Ah,
why was I trying to, I mean, are they going to help me somehow? I mean, I'm complete in Christ.
right.
So yeah,
It's just
very good.
amazing. It's just amazing, like the process of what I'm willing to do, b- you know, because I'm worried about that wound.
Hmm.
And so the more that I become intimate with it and familiar with it, the less authority it has in my life.
Yeah, that's great. Powerful. Well, I read The Wisdom in the Wound. I love it. It's a great book. And through it, Tony, I felt like you were really intentional about uplifting your family that you were born into. I guess we'd call it extended because I'm not talking about Karen and the kids. I'm talking
Yeah,
about
yeah. My
mom, dad, brothers, sisters.
family of origin.
Yeah, it seemed like as I read through, you were very, and maybe you weren't, maybe it was subconscious, but it seemed like you were very intentional about uplifting that extended family. And sometimes when you read a book, people are blaming their extended family for their wound. And would you talk about that process? Because it was something I noticed. I didn't feel like since there was any blame there, it was more honoring. Was that intentional?
It was
And
very
talk about it.
intentional. It was
Yeah.
very intentional
Wow.
because here's the thing is that one of the kind of the premise of the book is that if you're 100% responsible for how you think, feel, and act,
Mhm.
then I have to own my emotional part of the relationship.
Mhm.
And so when I look back at my childhood, I have to think about it. What this work has done in me has given me the ability to have empathy and curiosity for what my parents went through. I mean, I could not imagine having unplanned twins, right? I can't imagine some of the stuff that they had to deal with. It was just a crazy time in their lives. And, it's easy to want to say, wow, look what they did to me, or look at all of these other things. When the reality is, man, these are just two loving humans doing the best they can with what they can.
Yeah.
And so I sent a copy of the book, the PDF, to my dad and
Hmm.
stepmom, and to my mom, and to all of my siblings, to make sure that that they all felt comfortable with it. I wanted them to feel. I don't ever want to just talk badly about anyone, but especially the people that love me so well, or to the best of their ability.
Yeah. Did you get any feedback from them?
My mom was like, obviously my mom and dad were super proud of the writing, and all of my siblings appreciated it. My sister in Europe, it gave us an opportunity to talk about her perspective a little bit.
Hmm.
And so we hopped on a call and talked a little bit about her wound, and I won't share any of that, of course, but it was a good moment, right? It's,
Hmm.
we all had the same childhood, but we all experienced it differently. And that's true, I think, for most families.
Yeah. Yeah. Great point. One thing you communicated, I thought really well, was that it's okay for people to dive deep and ask questions and really explore some of their own wounds in their lives.
Mm-hmm.
Why is that important?
I think one of the things that we take for granted is the importance of that kind of soul work that is deep and hard.
Hmm.
We're wired, our brains are naturally wired to take the path of least resistance.
Mhm.
And it's a psychological, feature of our body, is that we just want to take the easiest path all the time. And so it's not very often that I think we get called to a place of discomfort. Although I think we see that in scripture a ton. I think we see
Hmm.
Jesus
Yeah.
doing the discomforting thing often. And so if we're going to model you know, that life, it's this kind of work that can help us do that in a different way. What's that Paul that says it's rejoice to the extent for which you can suffer with Christ. And I think
Yeah.
that's such a unique gift if we're willing to lean in. And, one of the things that I wish I would have put in the book that I didn't is kind of a preface around that the best part, this book is really going to help you open a door, but to fully walk through it, you're going to need people.
Yeah. What's crazy, Tony, as I sit here and listen to you talk and we're talking about your book, is that you, from all appearances, you seem like a very joyful, uplifting person. And maybe one of the most joyful and uplifting person that many of us have ever met. But yet you're writing a book about a wound and you've talked about seeing your psychiatrist. And isn't that interesting how, I guess, I don't know if you could say we wear masks, or a part of our dealing with our wound is covering up our wound. Does that make sense? Or
Yeah. Although I would say this is that the reason I feel joyful is I have peace about who I am in totality.
Hmm.
Right. And so I don't, I certainly, I certainly know how broken I am. Right. Like I know what a sinner I am. Like I know how.
So you're saying we don't need to remind you of those things.
No, you can. I'd say. But like the deal is like the part of the reason why I feel joyful is that I don't have much judgment on myself anymore about the wounded parts of who I am.
Wow. That's great. That'll preach. That could be a sermon.
I do preach it, right? Well, and so here's the deal, right? I have taken some time to look at that text that Paul writes in 2 Corinthians 15, where he talks about the ministry of reconciliation. It's like 2:15, 16 through 21.
Yep.
17 says, therefore, you're a new ambassador in Christ, and you could practice the ministry of reconciliation. And as I was kind of praying and meditating on the text, one of the things that became apparent to me is that we have to reconcile the fleshly part of ourselves with what God has called us to. Like there's a reconciliation that happens inside of us as much as there's a reconciliation that happens relationally between like you and I, right? And so if I don't get to a place where am okay that I am a broken sinner, saved by grace, repenting daily, sometimes hourly, then how can I ever be an ambassador for Christ? And if I'm an ambassador for Christ, how can I not have joy, right? Because he gives us that ministry of reconciliation, as Paul writes. Yeah. And so that's the kind of thing that like, it just fires me up a little bit.
Man, you've come a long way, baby. You're mentoring me now. It's awesome.
Well, I listen, like, I often lift you up as one of those people in my life. And it was because I think it was because you knew who you were in that season of life when I didn't know who I was. And so there were some behaviors in me that you loved me enough to call out. Now you can't do that if you're not in a good place personally. And that, you're certainly not perfect, and you're not the perfect husband. You're not the perfect father, right? Right. I mean, none of us are perfect, right? But you were clear about who you were in Christ. And that opened up the dialogue to help my relationship with Christ too. Wow.
Thank you. Tony, in your book, and I prefaced this a few questions ago, but you identified different kinds of wounds, I think about a third of the way through. Can you unpack that a little bit? And then I have a follow-on question with that.
Sure. So again, I sent the book out to a whole bunch of readers, and they were like, this is great. I still don't know what my wound is. Right. And so I write something called the Wound Identification Guide, and it's got multiple steps. I think there are 5 steps, 6 steps actually, on how to identify what your wound is. And then I kind of gave some examples of the different types of wounds for example, like the wound of rejection, right? Or the wound of abandonment, or the wound around betrayal or humiliation or injustice, just to name a few. And of course, that's not an exhaustive list. Yeah. There's lots of different wounds. What I will tell you is, and you have probably seen this too in your work, is when you begin to see enough people and you do enough counseling and you do enough dialogue, you can start to see patterns.
Yeah.
The enemy is not a creator. And so I think that there's a finite amount of wounds that kind of exist in the world at their core, right? Love, it almost always revolves around love and respect. It involves around how people see you and how you see them. But, we serve a God who is a creator. And so the gift on the other side is infinite. Like your gift could be anything, but the wound is probably a finite kind of pattern. And we've developed lenses around all of these.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, those are some deep thoughts. You also discuss how you show up, and you give a trigger example. And I thought that was really helpful. I guess one of the things that was floating around in my mind was, have you had to experience all of these kinds of wounds to write about them? Or did you learn some through like your relationship with others or counseling other people?
Sure. Yeah. It's mostly talking to other people, because there's a lot of stuff that just doesn't bother me. Right. Like I don't, I have done enough emotional work to know that all of these moments have existed inside of me. I couldn't have named them at the time, but it's much easier when I'm sitting on the counselor, the pastoral counselor or executive coach side of the table to see someone else's wounds, like to see your wounds or somebody else's wounds is much easier than to see my own. Yeah. And so that's why it's good to be surrounded by people and somebody to help kind of draw that out when you need it.
Yeah. Good. So on page 25 and 26, you talk about the edges of your wound, and you say that these edges act as emotional tripwires. I love that description. In fact, I wrote it down as I was reading your book. Does that come from your military background, or how did you come up with that? That was really good.
So I think the thing about a tripwire is when I was trying to think about how do you talk about the symptom of the wound, right? How do you talk about the precursor, the thing that comes first, right? And so that's kind of how the tripwire idea, I'm sure it came from my military background and what that means and looks like, because at the end of the day, like you kind of lean into this stuff and you don't get into a relationship, you don't always, you don't see it coming. Like you just didn't see it coming. Like I didn't see that I was going to have an emotional reaction to that email that somebody sent me or all these other things. So you kind of trip into it and then you got to deal with the backblast. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. I know what you mean. I know. Yeah. I won't get into it. As a chaplain assistant, you probably didn't set up too many mines, but there's probably a few you had to.
I honestly, I set up one mine my whole 14-year military career, and it was in basic training.
Yeah, I did too. That's funny. But why, you touched it a little bit. Why are the tripwires important about the edges? Could you unpack that just a little bit more?
Yeah. So the thing is most of us don't take the time to become really familiar with the things that trigger us. Right. And that's the essence of a tripwire. A tripwire triggers an explosion. And so if you can begin to see your tripwires, then you can begin to brace yourself before you get triggered. Right. Yeah. And so if I know like someone's walking down a path towards my heart and they're about to step on a tripwire that's going to set me off, then I have the ability to change directions if I need to, or to unplug it, or to surrender it, or to pray, or to like. One of the things I talk about a lot in the book is this, like feelings are just meant to be felt. And so I think even around that same time of the book, I talk about how like you just need to schedule time to deal with the cleanup after somebody trips the wire, right? Like most leaders that I work with don't have enough space in their schedule to deal with their own emotions.
Wow. That kind of is a good segue to my next question. You referenced this a few times. How important is journaling in the process of discovery and healing?
It's one of the critical disciplines. And let me also say this, I'm not a great journaler. So one of the things that I do is I will still talk to text. And so I'll just start getting my feelings out on paper or on my phone usually. I'm using a new app now to help me with some of that stuff, like where I can just talk and get some of those thoughts out. I'm a verbal processor. Like I need to have places to dump my feelings. And that's what journaling does. It becomes a safe space to dump your feelings. So if you don't like writing, try voice to text. If you don't like voice to text, try writing. Or if you don't like either of those things, try creating intentional relationships where you can be like, hey, can I just, one of my old mentors used to call it a puking buddy, right? Can I just vomit up my feelings here for a little bit and see what you think? Like we have to get the feelings out. That's what makes it so important.
You have a chapter toward the end of the book called, it's about leading with your wound. And it kind of sounds counterintuitive. Could you unpack it a little bit and tell us how that works?
Yeah, most leaders want to pretend like they're perfect, even though if you were to ask everyone in the room if they're perfect, no one's going to raise their hand. And so we create a false dichotomy in leadership around expectation. But if you can lead with your wound, you have the ability to build this thing that often gets referred to as vulnerability-based trust. And so if you can share your wound in a very intentional way and not from a place of reaction, but instead intentionality, then what happens is you open up the door for others to do the same. Yeah. And so I love the idea of what Jesus does in John 13, where he washes the disciples' feet. It says that knowing he was from God and returning to God.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then there's that word "so," and I tell people all the time to underline that in your Bible, because it connects the two thoughts, that Jesus knew who he was in the Father, so he could serve others clearly. Wow. And the nature of that service is a sacrificial, loving. It's a washed his feet, right? So it says that he removed his outer tunic, so he became intimate, right? He became vulnerable, and then he got on his hands and knees and he watched the dirtiest parts of someone's body. And culturally, it represents even more than that. And you and I both know that, right? Because if you think back to when the Saddam Hussein statue fell, everybody went up and hit them with the bottom of their shoes because they wanted him to get underfoot, yep. Right? And culturally, especially in that region of the world, like that's a big deal. And so we can really, if we lead from our wound, then it just gives us a unique opportunity to serve people.
Yeah, no, that's really good. I think it caught my attention because we had a general come and speak to us about a year ago. We were at an offsite in South Carolina. And, when a general's about to speak, I'm sure most of the people are like, oh, great, he's going to tell us about how they became so successful or whatever. And this guy got up and he said, I'm going to start out by telling you my 3 biggest leadership failures. And I'll tell you, everybody straightened up in their chair and looked at him. I mean, he had the room at that point. And he talked about some really bad things that he had done. Lives were at stake. People got injured or killed because of some of his bad decisions. And this guy was in the thick of it. And wow, it was powerful. And I thought about that, when I go to write a talk, and maybe this is part of, leading with your wound, but why not? Why not share some of those intimate parts that maybe have been failures? Because I think people can relate with you more in your failures probably than in your victories in some way, because it breaks down barriers. Not that Jesus had any failures and that's what he was doing. Yeah. I don't know. Do you want to talk about that at all? Or
I'll just say this, right? Like Craig Gershell, who's a leader that I have followed for a number of years, he says that people want to follow a leader who's always real than a leader who's always right. And so sometimes I think we put a false bravado on about being right instead of just being real. And so in that particular chapter, I talk about this idea about the emotional truth or the physical truth. Like there are a lot of ways that you can be vulnerable without sharing all the details. And I think that's a real gift for most leaders.
Absolutely. Tony, you and I have been friends for a long time and we've written other books together. How is this book different than any other project you've worked on before, such as a book or a paper or some other thing?
This feels very burdensome, if I could say that, right? Like God would not let this go inside of me. And so when you and I wrote the marriage book, Unbreakable, which I still use at marriage retreats all the time, and I love that book. It was a joyous, incredible experience. You and I went to this wonderful hotel in West Virginia.
TMI. No.
Morgantown. Oh, it's where we just had to work. It was in the middle of where we both were at the time. And so we got together for a weekend and we did the work, and it was joyous, right? And it was you and I kind of partnering together. And this was different than that. This was like, even with the podcast, I have so much fun talking about with people and to people, and my podcast family, the Bold Ones, they're just like great people, right? Like I just love the work I get to do. And then this book, there are times where I hated it. Like it's just like I gotta keep working on this stupid book, right? But also everywhere I showed up, the Lord was like, you can't let this go, right? So it was burdensome. So does that make sense? Does that feel weird?
No, I understand. It's like you had to deliver this baby before you moved on and did anything else.
Yeah. And somebody asked me, it was like, oh, do you have another book planned? And I'm like, no, right now I'm not thinking about any of that.
Okay. That's one of my last questions that I was going to ask. So I don't need to ask that now.
I'm just trying to survive this one.
Man, we're getting down toward the last few minutes. And so these are some kind of ending questions.
Yeah.
What is one thing you want your listeners to take away from today or know about your new book? Or another way to say it is, what is the one essential truth in your book that people need to know?
Wisdom comes from intimacy with your wound. You don't have to have it figured out, but if you don't know it, then it's going to be really hard to be wise, right? And wisdom and the fullness of the way I think the Lord intends it is a self-awareness part of that too.
What if somebody were to say, I don't think I have any wounds. Had a good childhood, got a good college, had a good career, have a good family.
I would say then you might be the exception to the rule of every person I've ever met. And then I would ask them to use the emotional intensity scale. Right. And so when's the last time in your life that on a scale from 1 to 10, you spiked above a 6? And if you've never spiked above a 6, then maybe I'll believe that.
Yeah.
Now your 6 won't look like mine, but I think everybody for the most part has a version of a 6.
Yeah. No, that's good. Do you want to talk about that scale for a second? You brought it up.
No, it's okay. People have certainly heard about it, but it's just this idea that if you're above a 6 on a scale from 1 to 10, it's almost always more about you than.
Did you say what a 1 is and what a 10
is? Yeah, like a 1 is like there's no emotional around it at all, and a 10 is like above a 6 is like I'm having lots of feelings, right? Like it's that's kind of thing, you know. So that's kind of how it works.
Yeah. Are there any upcoming projects or launches, maybe book launches, that we need to be aware of? And I won't ask you what'll be your next book, but tell us about the rollout for Wisdom in the Wound. Is there anything you want the listeners to know?
I mean, by the time this podcast comes out, the book is officially in the wilderness. So, the only thing I'll tell you is this is I'm really passionate about this message. And so this fall, I'm going to be talking to churches and businesses. And if your church or business feels like they might benefit from this message, then get in touch with me and I'd love to share it with them.
Very good. And Tony, the last question, you've kind of taught me this. I don't think I've worded it the same way. I don't know. But what would you tell your earlier self? Like if you went back, how old are you right now?
5 when this releases.
Okay. That's right. September 12th, right? 10th?
September 10th.
All right. Close. So if you were to go back 20 years, what would you tell 25-year-old Tony Miltenberger?
I would tell him to start doing the work of the inner work sooner. Start talking to someone right away in your 20s. Like I wish I would have started unpacking some of my wounding and my emotional responsiveness. There were a lot of relationships in my 20s that I burned because I was emotionally reactive instead of intentionally responsive. And I would love to tell my younger self, hey, I don't know if he would have listened. He was real stubborn. When you met me, I was real stubborn.
Good thing we were in the Army and there was rank and all that.
All that. Go get some help, dude. Don't try to do this alone. Like, and that, for me, that leads right into disciple making too. Because it was in 2007 when you first started discipling me. And that was probably the first time I was ever intentionally discipled.
Yeah. Hey, is there anything else I should ask or you want the readers to know?
No, man, it's been so much fun. It's been so good. It's been good.
This is my first podcast where I've interviewed somebody, and I think you've done a really good job. So I don't know what that means, but you're my first one. This has been great.
When are you going to start your podcast?
I don't think that's going to happen. I can't afford the microphone. So
you got a great microphone. Hey, thank you. Thank you for being such a dear friend and for your willingness to jump on here and do this. You're the perfect person to ask me about this book.
Well, hey, thanks. And I guess I'll tell the listeners, hey, buy the book. It's a great book. It's on pre-order right now at Amazon.com. And it's called The Wisdom in the Wound by Tony Miltenberger.
We'll link to it in the show notes, of course.
Awesome. Hey, thanks, Tony. This has been fun.
Man, I just love that guy. Thank you for making it all the way to the end of today's podcast. Thanks for being one of the bold ones This community means the absolute world to me, and your presence here matters. So thank you. And I hope and pray that the book continues to bless everyone who gets it in their hands and moves you and them closer to Jesus. If you need anything from me, I'm embarrassingly easy to find. Tony at twmilt.com, on Instagram at twmilt. You can learn more about the book at wisdominthewoundbook.com. And don't forget to sign up for our email list. That's where all the best content goes out every single week. So until next time, don't forget, if you want to follow Jesus, you must be willing to move